Do you have any prejudices about communism, Yugoslavia?
Yes, I have a prejudice against how this word is used, because I think that today we cannot speak about communism. Today we can speak only about socialism.
How about Na from Vietnam?
My feelings against communism are not prejudices at all. They are facts.
Garrett from Germany?
I completely agree with Na, but also with Trevo,
What's that?
because I think that real communism cannot exist.
Nyla from Pakistan?
To me, communism means dictatorship, and I'm against it.
Welcome to The World We Want, a television presentation of the New York Herald Tribune Forum for high schools. It features teenagers from practically everywhere in unrehearsed discussion of some of their common problems. Each of these young people is the winner of a nationwide competition sponsored by the Ministries of Education in their own countries. They were brought to the United States by Pan American World Airways and Trans World Airlines for a 3-month visit. They're staying during these 3 months in 4 different American communities and host families. But let me introduce you to the 4 participants in this discussion. From Yugoslavia is Trevo Indic.
Yes.
Although none of us speak Trevo's language, he held all 34 delegates spellbound the other night as he recited to us one of his own poems in Serbo-Croatian.
Thank you.
From Vietnam, Nguyen Tiu Na.
Right.
This is a private joke of ours because when Na arrived, she was almost in tears. She said, "My name is Na, but people call me Na. Na means something foolish. I want to be called Na." Now, will you try once more to help me hear the difference?
My name is Nga, but you pronounce it Na. It's so different. I don't know, how can you mix all of these things up and say it's the same?
Our Western ears are not subtle. I
But
apologize,
I
but I'll
accept
try
the
to say
pronunciation.
Na. From Germany is Garrett Greif. Garrett's hometown is just a few miles from the border between East and West Germany. It's Goslar?
It's
Is that
Goslar,
right, Garrett? And from Pakistan, Nyla Ahmad. The old and the new telescope with Nyla. In 1 minute, you'll see her doing an ancient Pakistani folk dance, and in the next minute, arguing with all of the force and logic of a truly emancipated woman.
Thank you.
Now, tonight we're going to be talking about prejudices, political prejudices. Starting off with communism, we have a Yugoslav who comes from a, as he's explained, socialist country, not communist, and Na and Garrett from countries who are divided by communism, and Nyla, who comes from a divided country in another sense. There are, what, 1,000 miles between East and West Pakistan?
1,010 to be precise.
1,010 to be exact. Well, political prejudices. How do you want to start this discussion?
Well, Mrs. Waller, to set the ball rolling, since we're all divided countries in one sense or the other, I would like to know the situation, the present situation in each country. What about you, Trevo?
In Yugoslavia, I think that people really believe in socialism in present political situation. The reason is very simple. When I compare the present situation in Yugoslavia with the situation pre-war, pre-Second World War, I can see great progress. Now we have free medical care, free education, many factories, and in the old Yugoslavia we had no factories and schools. So
You mean there was just ground there? Or no family?
something
No.
very near the point.
Oh.
An agricultural country. What were your parents, Trevo, your grandparents?
My parents were peasants, and my father was killed by Germans during the World War II, and my mother died during World War II.
Bring us up to date on what's going on in Vietnam, will you now?
See, my country before before being divided into a part was such a beautiful country. We had unity. See, and now it is divided by communism, and everything begins sad just because that my family, my father was killed by communism. My mother is now in the North Vietnam with my sisters and brother, kept as like prisoners there. And I think that communism or socialism just do bad things for my country.
Yeah.
Well, since the war, a great deal of reconstruction has been done in Germany, but still our greatest problem remains reunification. And for instance, it's interesting to know that a letter, for instance, takes longer from the town where I live, from Goslar, to get to a town behind the Iron Curtain, which is about 30 miles away, than from my town to America.
It is the same thing in my country.
Yeah. Trivo, you
Yes.
think communism has done much good in your country. Do you think Pakistan would be better off if it had a socialist policy?
I really don't know the situation in Pakistan, so that I cannot answer on this question. I can say that the situation in Yugoslavia really is very good for one such political situation as the socialism is.
Do you think that socialism in any way would be good if applied to any European country, as for instance Germany or France or Great Britain?
It depends. I think that the socialism is always specific. In every country you can see different type of the government, different type of democracy. But what it means only that in every country you can see different conditions, so that I really cannot say that socialism will be better system for France or for West Germany.
Do you think a socialist government would be good for underdeveloped countries?
I think so, because today you can see very characteristical features, for example, in India or in Egypt or in some other countries. What is the problem? The problem is how to improve the economic life, how to improve the standard of life. And I believe that with one planned economic system, really in India or in Egypt, it will be done more than a couple of years ago.
Okay, Trivo, keep Egypt out of this now. And one thing I must ask you, how is it that Gerd and Na feel so strongly against communism? When it was so successful in Yugoslavia, for example?
But I can explain it to myself with the different conditions. For example, in Yugoslavia, we had no so industrial traditions, for example, as a people in West Germany. We have quite different social and cultural and economic background than the people in West Germany. And when we are talking about socialism, I think that it will be very good to consider these problems, the questions about traditions and social backgrounds.
You're right that Germany... Oh, excuse me.
Go ahead.
You're right. Germany is a high industrial country, and that communism does not apply to it. But another thing why we don't like communism is that we see it each day how it works in East Germany.
Yeah,
What it is
I
like.
agree with Gerd, absolutely. Communism, written in books, is so different with communism applied in communist country. But I like to ask you a question, Trivo. Before you said that socialism, what do you mean by socialism, is good for countries
Underdeveloped.
developed. My country is too, but what do you mean by that? Is this make the people happy, or earn their money easier?
I cannot speak about your country because...
No, I mean that, do you mean that for your country?
Yes, I think so, for my country.
Trevor, don't you think it would be better if in Yugoslavia and in any underdeveloped country there would be a system of free enterprise as it has been in Germany? You see how far we have gotten since the war. We were completely destroyed, and now we are, we have a very high standard of life.
In Yugoslavia, we have free competition between the enterprises and the factories. It doesn't mean that the factories are over the control of the government, for example, like in Russia. This is one comparison. But the factories in Yugoslavia are property of the producers, and the producers are the people who must decide how they can distribute the profit. This is the question.
But you see, in my country, communism or socialism, as you mean, you mean that they make their people happy. See, they give a land to a countryman. He earned about 10 tons of rice, and they took about 8, And after, on the 2 tons, they took a taxes. Something like that. They don't, the people just walk. And all the money went over to Russia or China or things like that.
Okay, Triva.
And it has socialism.
Okay, you always like to call yourself socialist. Now,
Yes.
what is the difference between your country's policy and Russia? What are your differences?
I think there are many differences. And first difference is that in Yugoslavia, all the factories are the property of the producers. And in Russia, all the factories are the property of the central government. And this is one difference. And in Yugoslavia, we believe in the local communities, and we think that the central government must care only about, for example, international affairs, about currents, about army, but not to control, for example, local communities or all the factories in Yugoslavia or all the sections of social life.
The people, they control the factories, is that so?
Yes, through the workers'
Okay.
councils.
Can they do anything against the government policy if they control the factories?
They cannot, because they are voters which can elect this government, and this is the government of the workers and of the ordinary peoples in Yugoslavia. It isn't a dictatorship,
Oh,
because
but dash it all, if the workers control the factories, I mean, don't they have a right to do what they like? I mean, can't they say anything against the government?
no, because this is the government for the workers. You can see what is specific for Yugoslav parliamentary system. In our parliament, we have 2 houses. One of these houses is the Council of the Producers. The members of these councils were elected between the producers, between the people who work in the factories, in the enterprises, on the agricultural farms. This is something what we call the direct influence of the producers in our political system.
That's
Okay,
okay.
okay.
But you only have one party, haven't you?
What about the other party? Is that also,
No,
is that an opposition?
no, for example, in Yugoslavia, we believe that it is possible that today exists society without parties. And during the elections, we don't vote, for example, for the Communist Party or for the other parties' candidates. We usually vote for the people, for our communities. It doesn't matter, are you a member of Communist Party or you aren't.
Excuse me, Trevo, if, you see, your country is not like Russia, not under Russia, but why all the time Russia work for all the socialist country? You see, everything, international affairs are done by Russia. And I never heard that Yugoslavia stand up and say, down Russia. No, never. Always agree.
Trevo.
I agree with Russia. And it
Trevo.
means that you are under them secretly.
No, we disagree with Russia in some points. For example, we disagree with Russian political influence in some East European countries. But what is very, very characteristic, you maybe know that in 1948 we had political conflict with the Stalin's doctrine about the ruling role of Soviet Union in
Trevo,
so-called
let's get back to
socialist
basic points. See, you said that the workers can vote, isn't it, for the person who they want. But how many persons are they? 1 or 2?
No, they can vote for the persons who are elected.
Nominated.
Who
Nominated.
are nominated on the cessation of the meetings of the voters.
But it's
It
very
means that
strange that-
one member of the parliament, wait a minute, one member of the parliament can elected between 40,000 workers or producers.
That's very strange that all of these have the same opinion, isn't it?
Usually.
Usually they have,
But,
yes.
but Trevo, say we're in your country too, and I'm against, say, Marshal Tito. Now, do I have the right to go onto the street and say, damn Marshal Tito, anything like that?
Yes, you can express your
And
wishes
what
to
happens to me afterwards?
nothing will happen with you, but I think that it is one of the silliest way to express your wishes and your need for the change in the political life. Because I really think that it is better to vote for the other candidates during the elections, or to write to letters, for example, to the newspapers, than to stay on the street and to cry for the
So you, for
freedom.
instance, can write books and stuff against Tito, can you?
Of course,
But
you can
about-
criticize.
What about Gilas?
What about
Mr.
that man?
Gilas
He
is
went to-
specific case. He's tried because he damaged Yugoslavia in the international affairs, not for their ideas. A couple of years ago, he was the editor-in-chief of one political review, The New Thought, and he wrote many articles in this review. And he wrote too many articles for the biggest Yugoslav newspaper, Borba.
But Trivo, you just
it's
said
liberty.
it's freedom. I mean,
Liberty,
if he doesn't
freedom,
like the
democracy.
government policy, he can do
Yes,
anything
I
against
said,
it.
really, this is freedom.
Yeah, but so why should he go to jail?
Why? Because we believe that he insulted our country and our government,
But
and
so
this is quite natural. If you insult it.
How did he insult it? Exactly.
How? For example, he said that in Yugoslavia, economic life or cultural life cannot develop. That Marshal Tito is a dictator, and that
Isn't
the
he?
Communist Party is only new ruling class. It isn't true.
oh, but so what? I mean, the man has a right to say whatever he likes.
Yeah.
Yes, they can, but there is difference between anarchism and criticism.
What do you have in your country? What is your government? Is it a democracy?
Yes, this is democracy.
But
What
listen-
kind of democracy?
Yes. How,
This is democracy for the mainly part of the population, and I really believe that I, as one ordinary young man in Yugoslavia, can find all the freedoms through the present society.
But listen, Trivo, how can you have a democracy with just one party?
No, it isn't
Yeah.
party. I said that I think that we have no party system.
Oh,
But you have democracy.
Yes, this is very interesting. You cannot imagine the political system without parties. For example, I think that in United States today you can see only two parties, but in France you can see too many parties. But in Yugoslavia we have no parties. But you must understand that different conditions really make a different type of the government, and I believe that it is today possible that today exists the society without parties.
but not only don't you have any parties, you don't even have
Yeah.
the freedom of
You just have one party
yes,
and you just
saying
follow
anything
it.
against the government.
Yes, this is something what we cannot understand. I think the people in Western countries, and we during the elections don't vote for the parties candidates, but for the people, for the ordinary people, for our communities.
Okay, let's get on another question. What do you think of Vietnam and Germany being unified? How do you think
I
that
can
could
say
happen?
Let me
something only
interrupt
about-
just a minute. I wonder if since we've heard quite a bit of new and interesting information about Yugoslavia, I'd like to get just a bit more from Na and from Garrett.
Yeah.
Now, what happens, insofar as you know it, in North Vietnam, for example? Is there freedom to criticize the government? And what about East
You
Timor?
see, in North Vietnam, they say that the world have eyes and ear. Don't speak and don't criticize anything. Otherwise, you have your tax.
That's freedom, isn't it?
It is freedom
That's
and
freedom.
democracy for the people who are there.
But I think
You
that
see,
it isn't
excuse
freedom
me,
for...
I don't finish. You see, the people there say, we have freedom. But they just say, don't criticize them because it's not good. But they still, all the communists that still say that you have freedom, you can, for example, you can go to vote, you can give your money to the government. Freedom to give money to the government. Is it freedom?
May I ask you some questions, for example? You say freedom. May I know how many factories you have? What is the standard of life in your country? Is all the education free? Have you free medical care?
Trivo.
This is the freedom. For me, freedom is only understanding of historical pressure. And when I say freedom, I don't think about some philosophical questions. I
listen,
think
we
about
mean
economic
more.
life.
We mean democracy.
But we mean freedom in
more
democracy, freedom in unity. My country, you see, there's school, they have to pay for school. The only thing that they have, no parents. Children don't have parents. Children are children of communism.
Trevor, how can you speak about freedom,
Freedom.
if you can't do what you want, you can't say what you want, but still you have free medical aid and free
Sure, so has
things like
England
that?
free medical aid. I mean, all the medical services have been made free, but
I think that's not
Okay,
the main,
how
the
do
main
you
thing
can,
of democracy.
for example, in Yugoslavia, we have the law against the parties, and our constitution doesn't recognize parties or only one parties. But in West Germany, the Communist Party, for example, is prohibited.
Fortunately.
How about this fact? Is it freedom or?
Of course there's freedom.
What is that? And tell me something about the case with the Dr. Agers, the trial to him.
Fortunately, the Communist Party is prohibited in Germany. Of course, we can't by that prohibit the communist work in Germany. But anyway, we can.
But is it freedom? Is it freedom?
Of course.
The fact that one party is prohibited.
I think you will agree with me that the Communist Party is working against the government, completely
Yeah.
against the government, not as the Social Democrats in Germany
Yes.
do the opposition.
Does it mean
they are stand on democracy and freedom and on the on the fundamental law of freedom and humanity, but the Communist Party does not. It works completely against that, and so I think
it isn't
it's freedom
answer.
to-
I think that
Frivo,
it is
just a minute.
example.
See, his example, the government, the party works against the government. But say in your country, there's another party who doesn't agree with that government policy,
Which
but he
party?
wants to. Well,
Which
you
party?
see, you don't have one, and you call your country
We have
democracy.
three parties who work against who are in the opposition.
You must have many parties, and the people must have the freedom to choose. It means
I don't
democracy.
agree.
You see, in my country, no, I speak about my country. You see, a man, example, he don't agree with communism. They call him to their office, and they say, "You don't agree with us?" He say, "No." And after they brought him to the mountains, and there they left him there, and he died because he have to drink the water of a poisoned river.
Okay,
Well,
It's this
Trevor,
cruelty that they
just a
did.
minute.
It's not democracy. It's not freedom. Just you are obliged to.
No, I am not obliged, but I really agree with my people because my people have freedom to choose the form of the government. And during the regular elections term, we do these things.
Well, Trevor,
what
my-
you-
This is democracy for me if the mainly part of the population agree with one type of the government.
Excuse me, Trevor, choose between what? Between communist and communist.
No, it isn't question about party. This is the question about practical life. Who wants to improve the standard of life? Who wants to improve the education? Who wants to improve the medical care or the social protection?
Just one
I
party.
shall vote for the government or for the candidates who wants to improve my standard of life.
but there's only one party, and the candidates all belong to that party.
I said that
Excuse me,
communist-
let's move on to just one point. I think it's a fair question that Na and Gert started to bring up and
Yes,
then didn't
about
finish. If communism does so much for so many people, why is it that in Vietnam and in Germany, how many people cross over a week?
There are about 5,000 people who come over the border a week to West Germany.
And how is it
5,000.
in Vietnam?
We don't have many people. So we have only about 22,000 millions people in the whole country, and about 1 million of them escape from the north. But now that the immigration is stopped, you can see most of the time you can see people escape and they die by starving, and it's very, very, very sad. You see, sometimes the river which divided my country in two parts, sometimes you can see people in the other side trying to escape, and you can see the communist soldiers shooting them, and you can see their blood in
That's
the river.
freedom.
And that's freedom.
That's
Escape
freedom.
from-
Have you some facts how many people leave Yugoslavia? You have no. How do you can explain it?
Because they love freedom there.
Of course,
But
they
you
love
see, I know
freedom
that,
in Yugoslavia because they found all the freedoms in
Excuse me,
Yugoslavia.
Trevo. In my country, we are divided in two parts, and so they have something to choose. They are in the middle: communism, republic, democracy. And you see, what they try to do in my country in the north now, they pick children. They are about 5 years old, and they tell them, love communism, love Ho Chi Minh, Nothing else, and nothing else. They never speak about the United States. They never speak about democracy. So after, when the children grow up, they just know one thing. So how can they choose? They know one thing, so they just accept these things. For example, you have, see, if you have coffee and tea, you can choose, but if you have only coffee and you are thirsty, you must drink that.
It is actually the same in East Germany.
Yeah.
The children are only educated in one way, and they are preached how wonderful communism is, and communism is the only paradise for mankind, and they are even forbidden to go over to West Germany. Students are forbidden to come over, and that's freedom, Trevor.
And
Yes, the freedom is that Communist Party is prohibited in West Germany. Don't think so.
I think it's right, and it's good that the Communist Party is
Okay,
prohibited.
I can also say the same. You consider freedom and democracy is prohibited in your country, but you still say you have freedom. How funny.
No, I said democracy is for me only the question about economical life.
Excuse me, you aren't going to believe this, but our half hour is up. And we haven't, I'm sorry, but it went so quickly. We haven't even had a chance to talk about coexistence. And I know that for Vietnam and Germany, this is an especially important question because there isn't any existence for you, really, is there, until your country is united. But I've got to ask you now, we've only got a minute left.
My country is divided in two parts. Sometimes I want a third war just to unify my country, but when I think about it, I think I'm cruel. It's just a cruel thing. And I know what is war, so I just don't want it. But I don't know what. How can we unify my country?
Let me ask you if each of you will just say one word in conclusion if you have any reasonable hopes for the future at all. Have you? What is your reasonable hope for the future, Trevo?
I think that today it is necessary to recognize other ideological systems and other political systems. For example, for me, I can answer on your question with the point that I'm for active coexistence. It means that all the other countries, all the other nations must have respect for Yugoslavia, and we shall have respect for the other countries.
Right.
You see, I think that, the hope for the future is hope for peace. And I think peace now depends on diplomacy and the diplomats. Oh, it's why I want to be a diplomat myself.
What do you say, Gert?
I hope that Russia and America, I mean the East and the West, will find a way to live somehow together. And not only their future depends on that, ours does too.
Nyla?
Well, whatever happens, let it happen peacefully. Though we violently disagree with each other, yet I think we all agree that there cannot and must not be a third world war.
On that note, we'll end until next week.